How do you leverage self? What does that really look like?
Well, initially, it looks like that's self-serving. But I learned early on that paying attention to self and figuring out what it is that you want is inner-directed. It's an inside out, which is what we're taught as chiropractors, how healing occurs. Healing occurs from the inside out, above, down.
Above, down, inside, and out, ADIO.
And so in order to follow that model inside out, that we have to understand that we have things happen to us. It's how we interpret them and respond to them that determines what the outcome is. And that's a simple formula. E, which is event, R equals O. ER equals O. Event times your response equals the outcome, which a lot of times the person doesn't have control over the event, an automobile accident or a slip or fall or ingestion to this point of toxic materials, whatever the environment. So a lot of us don't have control over a lot of things, but we do have complete control over our response to it. And I found over time, and in my 42 years of practice in Lincoln, that people's response to their events that have happened to them, their opportunities for learning and growing, their response has a lot to do with their outcome. And that it is that we have control over, so we have to leverage what our responses are, what our internal responses are in order to get the outward goal of what we actually want in life.
May I add to that?
Sure, absolutely. Please do.
Okay. So 10 years ago, I would have agreed with the whole statement. I would say agree with most of your statement, especially the response and the goal. Being that I studied the subconscious mind, I'm actually going to assert that we can control the events that come into our life.
Okay.
And I'm going to assert that for experiences and lessons, we actually manifest it and bring it into our own field. Like I did.
There's a lot of that resonates with me. However, that might be a subject for a larger conversation as well.
Completely, right? Completely. But I would just say that my mindset shifted when I realized that our subconscious mind runs 95% of the show. And so since it runs most of the show, if we've been handed down a belief system or we had an experience early on in life or in a past life, we bring it forward to bring closure to it and release it such that we bring that event so we can also modify our responses and rise up and have the goal.
Well, here it's entirely consistent with our conversation because that is still my subconscious, which is self. Okay, so self manifesting inside out is still, I think, consistent with what we both experience in life.
Absolutely. I'm not saying that even though our subconscious mind most of the time is running the show, that's necessarily a bad thing. It can be. But what I'll say is that when our subconscious is running the show, especially as a kid, young adult, and we're not being completely conscious of everything, and the subconscious mind has to run your heart, it has to run your nervous system, it has to run your digestive system. Right, exactly. So, but what I'll say is some of our choices could be different and let the subconscious run the things it has to run and let us run the rest.
Well, the interplay between conscious and subconscious is a fascinating subject. I have some views on that, but we have to come up with our own inspiration and reasons for doing things in order for us to have the internal wherewithal to do what it takes to reach our goals. We have to, in digging deep, sometimes you can brush along the subconscious machinery, if you will, the way that it works. And so if you look at inspirational documentaries or movies, they reach deep and find out what they're more about. And I think that there's times of those types of adversity that can help with the interplay between conscious and subconscious.
Totally agree. So let's go back to the response. How do you want to direct people to help themselves consciously choose a different response to an event that they didn't expect, right?
Well, that takes some inner reflection and some self-talk. If you have a response to a certain circumstance, like an automobile accident where you were injured and you were in an automobile accident like 10 years ago and you had a really, really rough recovery, to transpose that, this is going to be really bad too, may not necessarily be the case, okay? So if you're already projecting your outcome based upon some information that may not be accurate, then you can realize, first of all, what it is that you're thinking about, and then determine if you want to do that have that same outcome or not. And then if you learn from whatever incident you had 10 years ago that some things that you didn't want to repeat, then you look for other ways in order to deal with what it is that you have currently on your plate to deal with.
So you're actually telling our audience, which I love, that they can choose their own outcome. Their mind is running running the show, right? They can actively choose their outcome, right?
Yes, I have done that myself. I have seen other patients do that. So you can.
I agree.
In my opinion.
My opinion too. Are you saying that the brain is just so much more powerful than what we give it credit for?
Oh, absolutely. It already automatically, brain, subconscious, they're a little bit different, but we probably don't have time to go into it right now. They do control so many functions so that we can use our conscious mind to operate what it is that we need to at the time. For example, I know your response to some things that happened to you recently is predictable in my mind because I know you and I know the type of thinker that you are. I have a personal experience with that as well. So I do walk the talk. A few years ago, I had an old football knee injury, high school football knee injury that I had to have drained regularly because it would expand and look like a water balloon. And so I would just have it aspirated and I would go on. The knee itself was good, but it just got large. One time, a couple of years ago, it got infected and then my knee went septic.
Oh.
And so I ended up in the hospital with hospital IVs. I had 3 surgeries on the knee. They had to remove the bursa, which was that thing that kept inflating with fluid. So earlier on, the surgeon said, if you don't want to keep going through this, you could have your bursa removed, but you would have to take 3 months off of practice. And I go, well, I'm not going to do that. So I just on it. So what happened was in the surgeries, they removed the bursa. And it's like, okay, so now you should take, these 3 months off and then you can rehab yourself back into practice. So it's a half a year. And I'm going, well, that isn't an option to me. So I'm going, if that's not an option to me, then that compels me to think, what are my other options? All right. What it is that am I going to go for? Even though I was told this. So that was what was this card that was dealt me. So I said,
you were told to do, let's say XYZ.
Yeah.
Which I consider to be an imprint, right? And someone giving you a thought form and inserting their opinion and memory and whatever.
Right.
Which for the average person, they would just follow that and go. But you chose differently.
Right. Qualify this. The surgeon that was telling me this was well-intentioned, according to him.
Of course he is, yeah.
He was speaking genuinely upon what his training and experience was. Okay. But I'm going, well, I might not be your typical person, all right, that you're talking to. So I thought these other options. And so the option I decided upon is I said, I'm going to ask him how is it even though you don't think it's likely, how is it that I can continue practice? And he said, well, you could wear a wound vac on your back because I had to have that for 4 months. You could wear a wound vac. It's like a bowling ball bag where you hook up the tube of suction to the wound because it was septic in order to keep it clean. Okay. They're portable wound vacuums. So I could wear, it was like a bowling ball. I wear on the back inside a backpack. And then he said, well, you could wear a leg immobilizer because you can't bend the knee. I said, okay, now I know I can play that game. So what I did was I got the leg immobilizer and I got the wound vac and I went to work and I figured out what it was, how I needed to move my body in order to do things I wanted to do. It was tremendously thought-provoking, physically demanding, challenging, absolutely. But I only missed 2 weeks of work max. And I was able to work through that and get total healing with my knee. No sign of that anymore other than this big scar. And I didn't go through 3 months of missing work and rehabbing my body back to its physical state. I was able to work through that entire process.
Did you use any nutrition or
Absolutely, I did. Absolutely. Nutrition and essential oils and homeopathy. And I got my adjustments, physical exercise. I hydrated, did stress management, rested. So I was all of the things that I say other people are important to do, I had to do. But I knew what to do them, and I decided that's the path I wanted. So myself made these decisions, decided to go down this path. And were there obstacles in the way? Absolutely there were. You should see the size range of some of the people I adjust. So I had to do some figuring. But what it did was I also find my understanding of biomechanics to a point I can help other people more specifically of the special conditions that they have. So I feel like I'm better off for it and to be able to help others. And I didn't go through the downtime, which would have had its own problems mentally and physically,
So let's look at languaging for a moment. Other people might say, look what happened to me. But when I hear you say this is what happened for me. Like, here's the blessing, here's this accident or concern wrapped in strange wrapping paper. But look what it did for me. Here was my growth wrapped in strange wrapping paper.